Today we take a look at the abandoned St. Louis Workhouse, a medium security institution with a long history of abuse and neglect.
Conditions inside were deplorable, with reports of overcrowding, extreme heat, and abuse.
By the time you see this video, the demolition of the prison has already began, but for some, the horrors that occurred within these walls will live on forever. Built in 1966, the prison gained its nickname, the Workhouse, from the site that was built before this one. Let's take a look at the original Workhouse to understand how this name came about. A 1940 city ordinance allowed forced labor to punish criminals sentenced in court who could not pay their fines. The average stay for those sentenced to forced labor was around a month, but let me tell you, this would have felt like a long month. Prisoners were chained up, brought to a quarry, and forced to break rocks with sledgehammers for 10 hours a day. In 1955, a huge riot broke out. Inmates attacked the guards, threw anything they could, and set mattresses on fire. The riot brought further public attention to the prison, and because of this, in 1966, the new building that we see here was constructed. Conditions at this new workhouse that we're exploring were far from ideal. Former inmates tell stories of suffering, abuse, and neglect. The prison would get extremely hot because of the lack of air conditioning.
Workhouse survivors tell horrible stories of suffering through temperatures as high as 115 degrees.
Some report that they were never even allowed to go outside.
I spent time in the workhouse. I was never allowed outside.
Rats, roaches, snakes, air filled with black mold. These are all conditions that were reported by those who did time in the workhouse. In 2017, a public defender organization filed a lawsuit against the facility's terrible living conditions. The lawsuit addressed the poor sanitation, poor medical care, and of course the extremely high temperatures. An entire campaign, CTW, or Close the Workhouse, has been dedicated to the closure of the facility, and they've been working diligently since 2018. One course of action involved protests outside of City Hall, as well as outside of the prison.
Rain, sleet, snow, hail, we won't stop till you close that jail.
CTW hasn't been the only group calling for the prison closure either.
Yeah, even big brands like Ben & Jerry's ice cream have been flooding social media with calls to close the St. Louis City Workhouse.
In 2021, the city finally defunded the workhouse, and the building has sat empty since 2022. A place as horrible as this was, I'm sure many people fantasized about breaking out of the prison. One thing you would not expect is people breaking into the prison. In November of 2023, 3 urban explorers cut a hole in the fence, broke into the St. Louis Workhouse, and accidentally locked themselves inside of a jail cell.
3 suspects broke into the former St. Louis Workhouse jail and accidentally locked themselves in a cell.
Nobody expected this to happen, but this did raise safety concerns about the building. The mayor established a committee tasked to come up with ideas on repurposing the site. I've heard stories of people arrested for exploring these grounds. One Reddit user reported multiple police cars surrounding his vehicle, and upon leaving the building, received a trespassing charge, as well as a second-degree burglary charge because he took a souvenir from the prison. It must have been recently abandoned because you can see from his pictures that this place was still in good shape when he was there. One of the most notable instances of break-ins was when someone brought an entire dirt bike inside of the building. Now, even though the building was never repurposed, many people were happy just to see it being demolished.
I feel like so incredibly emotional.
Start the demolition.
I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to check this place out before demolition began, so let's take a look at what I found inside. The first thing we explored when we came to the prison was one of the pods. We went inside this one right here. Pods are smaller housing units that hold a group of prisoners. Depending on the size, a small number of officers, or even just one, supervises each pod. You can see there's about 25 to 30 individual cells in this one. There's 2 floors, and each of the cells come with a bunk bed and a toilet. They had a few showers. They also had some tables with games printed on them. We left that area. We then walked past a pitiful looking outdoor area and went to explore another pod. Despite the warning of a dead body, we decided to go in anyways. This is where we're at now, and you can see this pod has a very similar layout to the first one we looked at. The cells are the same as well. From here, we were able to access this hallway, which had tons of boxes left behind. We found prison soap, books, and so many jumpsuits. There were also boxes full of the scratchiest blankets you could ever imagine. I did end up finding a jumpsuit in my size. This was no easy task though, because most of the jumpsuits that were left behind were gigantic. Most of them were sizes 6 and 7 XL. Anyway, after reaching the end of the hallway, we found ourselves right here, in between the old jail and the common spaces. It looked like they had already began demolition of the common spaces because there wasn't much left here besides this basketball hoop and a ladder to the roof, which we end up climbing later on. We decided to head to the prison yard, and that ends up being one of my favorite parts of the day because we were able to climb up one of the guard towers. So this is where the prisoners would go to get some exercise in, get some sunlight, even though some inmates report never being allowed to go outside. If you were allowed to go outside, this is where you would have gone. You can see they had a basketball hoop and workout equipment. Check out this shot right here. I'm a fucking pro. I'd argue that it takes more skill to do this than it does to make a basket. Of course, in an outdoor setting like this, inmates have to be supervised. That's why you see this guard tower right over here. We were very happy to find out that the guard tower was accessible, so we decided to go to the top and see what it looks like in there. Right when you walk in, there's not much besides a very small and narrow spiral staircase. This is what the top of the guard tower looks like. Obviously, there's a pretty good view of everything, because that's pretty much the point of the tower. There's also a toilet up here. If you're in the guard tower all day, you're gonna have to go somewhere. After the prison yard, it was time to go explore the old jail. We found tables and a vending machine, and there were quite a few rooms identical to this one. Right outside of there were the showers and the toilets. Like I said, there were many identical rooms to that one we just looked at, with the same setup and everything. These rooms were still in pretty good shape actually, compared to how bad the pods were. Here's a dormitory, and this is a setup that has many different inmates in the same room. You can see there's a large number of bunk beds, and even more of them over here. And the dorm also had its own eating area as well. We decided we were gonna go upstairs. On the way, we found this mural, and we found some inspirational papers on the wall. We went up this extremely sketchy staircase. You can see it's not really even attached on the sides, and on the top it's hanging on for dear life. This is me going up those stairs. Here's a close-up of what I'm talking about. After we made it to the top, we found the room where they used to store their records at. We actually found a few pieces of paper that were still left there that had information on different inmates. They also had incident reports up here too. This is one of them that I read. When I spoke to the inmate, he stated someone kept taking items out of his bucket. When asked to identify the inmate that took his items, he explained he knew the inmate but refused to identify anyone. We found more shared rooms upstairs as well. You can see it got so hot in this place that the damn fans started melting. Down this hallway, there were some dormitories with fewer beds. I found one of the inmates' copies of the New Testament. At this point, we'd seen all of the old jail, so we went back to the common area where they'd started demolition so we could use that ladder to get onto the roof. The roof was definitely cool to see, so now the only thing we had left was entry and visitation. This is the very front of the building. There's a lot of broken glass. You can see all the seats that were there for people who were waiting. Over here, there were areas for professional visits and public visits. And then of course, all the phones so you could talk to someone that was in here. That's going to conclude the history and the tour of the prison. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.